The ultimate soccer show. Join me, listen, you'll love it. Everybody does.
And welcome into the Ultimate Soccer Show. We're going to be talking soccer derbies, or soccer's greatest derbies. So get ready. There's no rush on this one. So how you doing? Hope you've had a great day. Get ready, get settled. There's no rush on this one. We're going to take our time. It's going to be some good stuff as we go through. And there's a couple of questions that we're going to get posed to me before we get off the ground, and then we'll see some examples. The questions are thus as follows. What is a derby match? What is a derby match? Indeed. Well, a derby match is a game between two teams from a local city, the same city, or cities very close to each other. They're either teams from the same geographical area. There can be miles in between, obviously, but they can be close to each other from that part of the world, yeah? Maybe the same state, the same province, the same county. You get my drift, right? But it's local. And people literally live for that derby match all through the year. And normally within league football, you get one at home and one away. So there's two a year. So it's home and away. And it's literally, at the end of the day, it's about pride. It's about entertainment. It's about having a good time. And it's about bragging rights. And if your team wins the local derby, then you get to strut around town with your colours a little bit higher than the guys that lost. So in the heart of it, that's what a derby is. And remember, the players get into it too, and sometimes the tackles get a little bit more fierce. The lower down the leagues you go, they absolutely do. And a derby is a wonderful thing, basically. It's a local battle, and it's about bragging rights. And really, that's the heart of it. Why are derby fans so passionate? It's a case of, if you live in the same part of the world and you're living in the same city, example, then really this is about the big picture. It's the big story, you know. It's about your team being numero uno, and the passion comes from literal history, the history behind the teams. That's where it really knocks on from. We'll get to that soon, but it's about bragging rights at its root core, and it's about your team being on top. And that's why the guys get so passionate, because they don't want to be trodden on or down. They want to be numero uno. So that's why guys get so passionate. And it's passed on through your family. You know, if you're a red or you're a blue or you're a green or you're a yellow, whichever your team plays in, and your family's been that way, chances are when you have kids, your kids are going that way. Unless you're my brother who goes the other way just to have fun with it, yeah? But I'm saying, at the end of the day, it stays within the family, and the passion was in with the family, just as the passion for your love for your club. It's pretty much embroiled into each other. Yeah. The history of the derby. What is the history of the derby? Now, one of the derbies that we won't be covering, but I'll give you some good in-depth history, is the Manchester derby between Manchester United and Manchester City. Now, the reason why this is such a big derby right now is because, it has been forever, is because it's a split of the city. It's half the city's red and half the city's blue, just to give you an example. And Manchester became bigger as a massive game due to the industry that went into Manchester hundreds of years ago, that was literally on the coast, which we'll get to in another derby soon. But that industry left and made Manchester a much more thriving part of the world. Thus, the population grew, industry grew, teams grew. And as in history, if you have one big city, you do have two teams that literally become rivals. For Manchester, there are other teams in the Manchester area, but the big one, you should say, for a rivalry, for the history's sakes, is the Manchester derby between Manchester United and Manchester City. And it's been going on for many, many years. It'll never lose its place. But we're going to talk about other ones. But the history of it, it comes over time. It can be a railway station that is embedded at a certain station, part of the world. And from there, everything grows into a little town. It grows then into a city. It's the industry that was threaded and spread throughout England. It's canals and its railways that literally spawned and gave birth to many soccer clubs, even many other sports and many other sporting events too. But staying with the soccer, it was the Industrial Revolution pushing through, train tracks, canals already through before that, spreading small towns, towns growing, clubs and people wanting, you know, their own soccer team or their own cricket team per se. And that was the heart and root of it, of the history. how it spread through the UK. And then obviously then you get your teams, locales, and there you breed the rivalry. There's the history in the short term behind it. Ever since then, though, the games have absolutely been phenomenal for the locals, and sometimes tough on the losing team's fans because, like I say, it's all about bragging rights. So, without said and done, we've got one more question to pose, and then we'll start moving on. And we're going to start having a bit of a laugh and a joke as well. Don't worry, we've got some stuff buried. Next up, what are some examples of famous derbies? Now, we're going to get into the meat and veg of it right now, but I'll tell you now, honestly, there's so many derbies around the world that we could have covered. I've literally picked some that I want to show as examples, okay? So the Milano derby between AC Milan and Inter Milan. We haven't covered it. We're not covering it, but I'm just saying, have recognized it. Just like there's many, many other derbies around the world that we could recognize. But we've got to go in sequential order or numerical order or in historical order. And it's in historical order that we march with this one. The first one we're going to touch is the Old Firm derby between Celtic and Rangers from Glasgow. And what is the oldest soccer derby on the planet? It's this one. It's Rangers and Celtic, and they play every year. And it's the most well-known derby on the planet. There are others. We're going to get to them, but this one is the oldest one. England, Scotland, national teams have the oldest ever rivalry. That started in 1872, finished 0-0, and there was 4,000 people in attendance. That was England, Scotland. That's the oldest rivalry on the planet. But as club soccer, it's this one here. And they played over 432 games as we speak in the history. So it's a fantastic, fantastic game that's gone on a long time. Now, one of the big things about this is that it has been a bit of a sectarian divide as well, because Celtic is the Catholics and Rangers is the Protestants. And this does literally split neighborhoods and is a bit of a divide in other places in the world. But right across the world, it's a game that's looked on with much pleasure, and people do check the score no matter where you're from in the world. This is one of the games that you do check because most soccer fans, let's be honest, we're all about history. We know our history. We know all the World Cups, who won them, yada, yada, yada. We know who's won the Champions League the last 10 years. And the rest, we are very well adept at what our knowledge is about with our game because it is a religion. Soccer is our religion. There's no doubt about it. So with Scotland and the football rivalry, it is ingrained. If your family's blue, your kids are blue. If your family's green, your kids are green. It's that simple. There's no way about it. Now, a couple of little facts before we move on to the next derby, because we're going to keep this rolling along. The next derby coming up, you're going to love it. But just a couple of facts. The first meeting was May the 1st, 1888. May the 1st, 1888. Think about that for a second. 1888. It's 2023. And that first game, Celtic beat Rangers 5-2. Ooh. The last meeting, however, was at Ibrox a couple of weeks ago, and that was 2-2. Celtic were winning 2-1, and Rangers tied it up right at the death. The next game for Celtic and Rangers is the Scottish Cup final. That's February 26th. Then after that, April the 8th in the Scottish Premier League at Parkhead. And Parkhead is where Celtic play. Ibrox is where Rangers play. And the most wins at the moment is Rangers have got 168, Celtic's got 162, and the rest have been ties, draws. So there's some information about the oldest derby in the world. And I'll tell you what, there have been some battles. There used to be a lot of hooliganism on the terraces that really soured it for a lot of people. Nowadays, it doesn't happen like that anymore. It's a fantastic event, and all families can get to either side, although there is still that divide between the politics. It's probably the most... Your hair stands on end when you go to Ibrox or Parkhead for that game. I tell you, I know it because I've been there, and my big brother knows that too. Absolutely. Now, the next derby we're talking about is the one that you love very much, the El Clásico. Now, the El Clásico is a massive game, massive derby in Spain between these two guys. Real Madrid, Hala Madrid, and Barcelona. Magical teams, magical teams. Now, The name El Clasico is given to every game that Madrid plays with Barcelona. Every game. It used to be just the league games. That's its originality. But with time, they've called every game El Clasico, whether it's La Liga, Copa del Rey, Champions League, Europa League, if they were playing there, but they're never that bad. And literally, it's a game that people around the world live and die and breathe for. Latin America, they live and die to watch this game. There's lots and lots of countries that tune in for the El Clasico. And the El Clasico, remember, is the name given to just these two guys, yeah? Barca and Madrid. And it used to be, like I say, just for league games. Now it's for every game. So a little bit of interesting there. Now, we'll give you some facts and figures on this one as we go through. The first meeting between Barca and Real Madrid was the 1902 Copa de la Coronación, which was obviously the early version of the Copa del Rey. And that was 13th of May, 1902. So that was the first game. Barcelona won that one 3-1. So early days, Barca's like, yes. Then the latest meeting was January 15th, just gone by. And it was the Supercopa de España. And Barcelona won again. 3-1. Seems to be Barca's scoreline on this program tonight, eh? Yeah. The next meeting is going to be La Liga, 19th of March. And I tell you, when you're looking at the most meetings or the meetings so far, there's been officially 251 meetings. 251. There's been 34 exhibition games and total matches is 285. But the most wins is what counts. Madrid's got 101 wins. Doesn't sound too good, does it? Barcelona has 118 wins. So Barca's winning that as well. Might surprise you, hey? Considering, you know, Madrid's got more Champions League by a mile. Just letting you know. Now, most players who played in the El Clasico the most. Sergio Busquets, Lionel Messi, no shock there. And, this might interest you, Sergio Ramos. Yeah, all played 45 games. Now, seeing how Lionel might be going back to Spain, might be, and Sergio's going to be finishing it, and sort of, it looks like if he does go back, then maybe Lionel or Lionel can put up another record, yeah? And then finally, top scorer for all time in El Clasico. Who do you think that is? Just for a second. Who do you think that is? Would you think it's Lionel Messi? You'd be right. He's got 26. And the largest ever victory. You see, Barca's been having it all the way here. Well, now it's Real's turn. Because the biggest ever win was Real 11, Barca 1, 11-1. And that was on 19th of June, 1943. That is a lot of news about El Clasico. And like I say, the next one coming up is March 19th. March 19th, coming up pretty soon. Next one we're talking about, Super Clasico. Get a load of that. Okay, Super Clasico. That is Argentina, the Argentinian derby, the big derby. And that's between River Plate and Boca Juniors. The word Super Clasico, if you really want to know it, basically breaks down into two words, Super and Clasico. Clasico in its original state means derby, okay? Derby in Argentinian and Super Clasico was the first term ever used for one of the big games. There wasn't the term Clasico before Super Clasico. Super Clasico was the first ever term for a derby. It was then exported to other countries. But Super Clasico Argentina, was the original Clasico term that was exported throughout the rest of the world. Now, a few of the stats and figures on this one is that it's fiercely contended. And before we get into it, if you haven't seen one of these games on your TV sets or looked at the stadiums during game day, I will tell you this. It is absolutely local. It is nuts. The passion inside these two stadiums is absolutely bazonkers crazy. Absolute crazy. It's unbelievable. The noise, the songs, the passion, the colors, they are alive on game day. It is nuts. It rules their lives. Like I said before, it's a religion, soccer. You see the religion in them stadiums. It's unbelievable. So Super Clasico, it's more than just the derby. It probably is the birth of the term derby in its full sense. Clasico, yeah? So, moving on. Couple of little things here, though. Comes off in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and that's the other thing. It's like in Buenos Aires, so there's not much traveling for either team. Couple of little facts, though. The first ever meeting was August 24th, 1913. The latest meeting's coming off 11th of September 2022, and that was Boca Juniors 1, River Plate 0. And I've actually bumped into Ariel Ortega, who was a massive player with River Plate, and he was an absolute gentleman, absolute wonderful, beautiful person, beautiful gentleman, absolute professional, very courteous, just like a normal guy, but superstar, absolute superstar. And very fortunate that I got to share time with Ariel Ortega. I can show you something on another show that he gave me, but not for today. That's for another day. The stadiums, if you want to know, for Boca Juniors, it is La Bombonera. La Bombonera. And if you want to go to River Plate, it's El Monumental. So there you go. Now, statistically, meetings, 258 meetings. The most wins is Boca Juniors has 90. And the most players, Reinaldo Melo, has 42 matches. So Reinaldo Melo, 42 matches. And all-time series, Boca Juniors 91, 83 draws, and River Plate has 84 wins. Largest victory, though, Boca Juniors 6-0 over River Plate, and that was December 23rd, 1928. Wow. And then River Plate 5-1 over Boca Juniors, and that was the 19th of October, 1941. So as you can see, 1928 and 1941, them are not really big scores. I mean, 6-0 is a good score, but it's not crazy. It's not 11-1, you know, like Real Madrid over Barca. Ouch. But 6 and 5-1, you would have thought since 1928 there would have been another 6-0, yeah? And since 1941 you would have thought, well, maybe there's been another, you know, another 5-1, but no. So it's been very tight all along. And excuse me, little fly, get out of the studio. Get out of here. He's breaking in. He's a hooligan. That little fly's a hooligan. Now, the next one we're going to touch, we're going to move closer to the centre of London, or the north part of London, and we're going to talk about the North London Derby, and that's between Tottenham Hotspurs and Arsenal, or you could say Spurs and the Gunners. Arsenal-Tottenham, a fierce North London rivalry, you say, hey? Was it always like that? No, it wasn't always like that. But the first time these guys get to knock it around was 1887. 1887, and back then, Woolwich Arsenal were not in North London. They were in South London, yes. And Tottenham was still where they pretty much are today, in North London, a North London club. But Arsenal were not always a North London club. So when they win the league this year, if they do, I guess I just jinxed it. But if they win the league, it's an original South London club that's winning the league that is now a North London club. But if you go into that ground, it's the Emirates right now. There's also another ground that you know in your history that Arsenal had too, and that was Highbury. And I'll tell you, Highbury was a fantastic game every time that Tottenham came to the ground. Small ground, great atmosphere. They used to call it the library for sad reasons, but it wasn't a library. It wasn't boring. Highbury was a great cauldron of noise when Tottenham and Arsenal were going at it, much like White Hart Lane in the day. So I'm explaining some of the history moving in time going backwards, where Arsenal and Tottenham have been going at it, like I say, since 1887. But those old stadiums is where most of that history is. The fans are still the same people. They change out, they come back. They change out, they come back. The fans are the fans. But the stadiums where the histories are. If you go online and you look down on Google Earth and you go to look for pictures for Highbury Park, you'll see that they're now literally it's a housing complex where the stands were, and the ground where the football field was, that's now gardens per se. Do yourself a favour, go on Google Earth or get some pictures of Highbury Park and look it up. And not far away is the Emirates Stadium, so there's some more history about it. But that where Highbury Park is, the history on that ground where Arsenal and Tottenham played, you'll never rewrite some of the classical games they had there. It was absolute magical glory. And some of the goals, I can say Thierry Henry, just for instance, a fantastic player, brilliant athlete, what a genius. And he's just one of the greats that this game, the Arsenal-Tottenham, gave us. Now, some of the factors moving along. First meeting was 1909, and that was the 4th of December 1909. In the First Division, Arsenal wins 1-0 over Tottenham. Latest was 15th of January 2023. Arsenal wins 2-0 over Tottenham. Stadiums, now you've heard it before. Arsenal has got the Emirates and Tottenham has the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I don't know about you Spurs fans, but Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, you might as well have just called it White Hart Lane too. I don't know. I like White Hart Lane. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for Tottenham Hotspur. I know it's all about naming rights and this, that, and the other, but if you're going to do that, sell it off to some big company and make some money off it, for please sakes. Anyway, moving on. Meetings, 193 meetings so far. Arsenal's got the most wins with 81. The guy who played the most games, fantastic Northern Ireland player, David O'Leary. Fantastic servant for the Arsenal and a great player. Top scorer in this one might surprise you, seeing as he's not been there so long, but Harry Kane has got 14 goals as the top scorer in this event. You might have thought that Thierry Henry might have been that guy, but Harry Kane is your man. All-time, Arsenal 81 wins, Series 51 draws, Spurs 61. And the largest victory, might surprise you, Tottenham 0, Arsenal 6. So Arsenal have got it again. And that was the 6th of March, 1935. Again, since 1935, there hasn't been a score to equal a 6-0. That just tells you that it's got closer and closer and closer as time has worn on. Who knows? Maybe sooner or later we'll get a 7-0. Who knows? And Arsenal's looking pretty good every day. But hey, that's your Arsenal and your Tottenham. The next one we're looking at is the German big derby between Bayern München and Borussia Dortmund. And that is Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund. Let's get into that one. Eins, zwei, drei. Der Klassiker zwischen Borussia Dortmund und Bayern München. Jetzt sofort. What I just said was the classical game between Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich. Let's go. So this game here, connoisseurs of the game, historians of the game, German fans, fans around Europe will say, why is this a classical? Why is this a classic? They don't have any history. It's only new age history that these guys have really got any ground to say that it's a derby. Well, geographically, it's not really a derby because they're on the far ends of the country, you know, so like they're both further south in Germany, but they're east and west, and Bayern's really way down south, and Dortmund's over really further, you know, to the western, middle-ish German. So they're not really close geographically, but where they are close and where they do get this derby getting up and running over the last sort of 30, 35 years in the build is that over the last 29 years, either Bayern München or Borussia Dortmund has won the German title, and they're with it a lot of trophies as well. So they've literally dominated German football for close to 30 years. So when you think about it that way, these two teams deservedly have built their rivalry, if not derby status. So once you've got that big rivalry and the fans are used to seeing each other for the fight of the trophies, I guess you can relate that down to being a derby. So like I say, maybe for people around the world and in and around the connoisseurs of the world of football or soccer, they say, no, it doesn't qualify for me as a classical or a classic. Well, for the footballing side of it, I think it does. Now, let's go on for some of the other stuff. First meeting between Bayern München and Dortmund was the 16th of October, 1965. Not so long ago, hey? Only 1965. The last meeting was, and that finished 2-0 to Dortmund. And that was the first one. So Dortmund slapping Bayern on the first day. Then you got to say the latest meeting was 2-2. And that was Dortmund 2, Bayern 2. That was October 8th last year, 2022. Next meeting coming up is Bayern versus Dortmund. And that's going to be the 1st of April coming up. Statistics, 107 total meetings. Bayern has 65 wins. The most games for a player in all time. So that's since 1965. And he hasn't been playing since 1965, that's for sure. And he wasn't even born in 1965 either. But the guy with the most games in the derby, der Klassiker, is Thomas Müller. Thomas Müller. And the top scorer, this will surprise you, but won't surprise you really when you think about that club there. Think about the guy who's been banging the goals in for Bayern München up until this year. Think for a few years. Yes, you've got it. You know who it is. And he scored 32 goals. Oh, I didn't tell you. No, but you know who it is, right? It's Robert Lewandowski. Great Polish forward. Robert Lewandowski. I don't know why Bayern let him go. Such a great striker. Anyway, largest victory. Bayern München 11, Dortmund 1. Sorry. Bayern München 11, Borussia Dortmund 1. There you go. 11-1 to Bayern München. And that was on the 27th of November, 1971. Do you know how many years ago that was? Go on. How many years ago was that? Do you know? I'll give you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. 51 years ago. And counting. 11-1. 11-1 for the FC Bayern. Yeah! Next game we're going to talk about is the Turkish derby. That's got some spit to it, I tell you. The Intercontinental Derby. We're talking about Fenerbahce and Galatasaray. The top game for Turkish fans. And we're talking Istanbul as well. Istanbul, Turkey, Fenerbahce, Galatasaray. It's an absolute battle. It's battle. It's passion. The noise in the stadium is bedlam. And sometimes I think mostly some of the craziest scenes or most passionate scenes I've seen inside stadiums have been in Turkey and have been at this game. The noise, the building quakes, it shakes, it's loud as can be, and it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It's fantastic, fantastic atmosphere. And if you ever get a chance to savor that or take it in or be at that game, well, I'd say it's like a bucket list thing. You need to go there and do it. It's like the Old Firm or the El Clasico or the Super Clasico. It's one of those games that you need to savor and take in and travel and get in there and buy that ticket, travel there and go to it. And there's no exception with this one. It is an absolute competitive match all the way through. And like I say, your fans wear it either or. Whoever wins, you're gliding until the next one. Now, to take us some of the interesting factors for this one, the first meeting was January 17th, 1909. That's 114 years ago. Quite a long time, hey? Galatasaray 2-0. Yeah. Latest meeting, Fenerbahce 0, Galatasaray 3. And that was in the Super League, 8th of January 2023. So Galatasaray's got bragging rights now so far. Next meeting is on May 21st. And that's in the Super League as well. So far, Galatasaray's got a bit of bragging rights there. Now, on the statistics side, 396 games all term. Most wins, 148 for Fenerbahce. Most played games by one player. Turgay Siren, 55 games. 55 games. That is a hell of a lot of games for a derby player. Top scorer was Zeki Rizasporil with 27 goals. An all-time series, Fenerbahce's won 148. There's been 122 draws. And Galatasaray's won 126. The largest victory. Who do you think won the biggest game? Was it Galatasaray or Fenerbahce? Well, in fact, it was Galatasaray. They won 7-0. And that was back on February the 12th, 1911. Again, like few of the other big scores, 6-0s back in the 20s and the 30s. This is 1911. 7-0. And since then, they haven't had a score to eclipse that. Kind of interesting, hey? Really is. I would have thought by now they would have had something close to it, but apparently not. Next one we're talking about is the Merseyside Derby. That's Liverpool and Everton. Let's get to it right now. The Merseyside Derby, Everton-Liverpool. Fantastic game. It's been played continuously in the league since 1962 without break. That's something of a special thing for local rivals. Without break since 1962. That's absolutely amazing. The other thing that's really interesting about this game is that, like I say, sometimes you're in a city where you play the other team. Well, these guys both reside in Merseyside, where Liverpool and Everton play. The other thing is that across Stanley Park, a distance of just a mile separates both Goodison Park and Anfield, where both Liverpool and Everton play. Obviously, Everton play at Goodison Park and Liverpool play at Anfield, just a mile away. It's an absolutely wonderful city, Liverpool, like most wonderful cities around the world. What makes this City exceptional, though, is that the great brotherhood and sisterhood that these clubs portray throughout hard times and good times. I'll give you two examples. FA Cup finals and a League Cup final. The 1984 League Cup final was contested by both Liverpool and Everton. Both sets of fans sat side by side throughout the whole stadium and were chanting Merseyside, 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 and certain things and certain songs. Again, in 1986, both sets of fans were contesting the FA Cup final in 1986, again at Wembley. And again, both sets of fans sat side by side. And literally, there was no trouble. There was a lot of peace. And it was literally that this was the friendly finals and the friendly fans. And it really set a great promotion tool at that era for fans to just get along and no violence. And like I say, the city of Liverpool did themselves a fantastic pat on the back with their great behavior, great human nature. And it really did send a signal around the football leagues that, wow, this is how you act at a football match. And everybody gets in on the side and everybody has fun. There's no violence. There's no bad feel. Somebody's got to win. But because so many people live across Liverpool or Merseyside and that are either red or blue and live on the same streets or in the same families, etc., everybody's interconnected. And everybody knows each other. So the friendly finals and the friendly fans, it really does true testament to Liverpool itself. Now, taking a look at some of the stats. First game, October 13th, 1894, October 13, Everton 3, Liverpool 0. Ooh, good one for the Blues. Latest meeting was the 3rd of September 2022 at Goodison Park. Do you remember the score? No, there wasn't any score. It was 0-0. That was good for Everton. They got a point. Next game's coming up is the 13th of Feb. That's at Anfield. It's going to be a barn burner. Stadiums, by the way. Obviously, Liverpool play at Anfield and Everton play at Goodison Park. Now, there's been 241 games between these two. And believe you me, game day is a very interesting theme. No trouble. It's just lots of passion, lots of banter, lots of good talk. Now, the most wins, 97. Liverpool has 97. The guy that's played the most games is a Welsh goalkeeping international icon, Neville Southall. Absolute wonderful goalkeeper, absolute Everton icon, legend. And when he played in goal, you knew he was in goal because of the baggy pants that he was wearing. You very rarely saw him playing in shorts, but yeah, Neville Southall, fantastic Welsh international, played the most games in the Merseyside derby with 41 games. The top scorer, this might interest you and you might be surprised, not so surprised, but because he's Welsh, again, this may well surprise you. The top scorer in the Merseyside derby, all time, even higher than Dixie Dean. Remember, Dixie Dean got 60 goals in one season. I wonder if Erling Haaland's ever going to eclipse 60 goals. Anyway, staying with this one, the guy that scored the most goals in the Merseyside derby was Ian Rush, another great Welsh international. How many goals did he score? How many do you think? It was 25. All-time series, Everton 67 wins, 97 wins for Liverpool, and 77 draws. The biggest win was in 1935, and it was Liverpool 6. There's that fly again. Everton 0. 6-0 again. 1935. It's nearly 100 years ago, and they still haven't beaten 6-0. I mean, come on. What's wrong with the goal scoring nowadays? I mean, let's have it, you guys. I'm joking, obviously, but 6-0. Back in 1935, I tell you. I mean, have they forgotten how to score goals? I tell you. The next derbies we're going to talk to you about are Canadian derbies. Yes, Canadian soccer derbies. The first one we're going to touch, well, that is quite easy. It's the Cascadia Clash. Get into that. The Cascadia Clash between Vancouver Whitecaps and the Seattle Sounders. There's also part of this that's the Cascadia Cup, which also invites another team. And that other team is also a Major League Soccer team from the same region, and that is the Portland Timbers. And the Cascadia Cup is awarded to the team, the three I just mentioned. The best team of those three wins the Cascadia Cup with the best league record for that season. So there's another trophy, bragging rights with that as well. But with this game itself, you got to say, Seattle and Vancouver are so close to each other that it should just be a rivalry all on its own, like people feel it is. And true rights, it definitely is breeding as a real decent soccer rivalry. It's still very new in its history, per se. It's not going back to 1887 like a few that we mentioned before. But with histories, as you'll hear in the next one, you got to put some time in. You got to grow and you got to bed yourself to stick around and survive and really become soccer history and really become what you would say a massive derby. Now, looking at some of the notes from this one here, the first meeting that we've got between these guys came off June 9th, 1974. Remember, not 1864, not 1887, but June 9th, 1974. So it's still relatively new in history of soccer, but it's got years, right? 54 to now, that's got a lot of history. That's got some body behind it. It's got longevity. It's been around. It's stuck around. Various leagues, but it's stuck around. It's got the history. It's got the tradition. It's got the passion. It's got the fan base around it. It's got history to burn and to run with and move with. And the way these clubs are moving in the Major League Soccer world, they're moving strong for the future, and they're going to be around for a long time. My prediction for Major League Soccer is that one day it will be the world's league because of finances in America. Now, staying with the Cascadia end of things, like I say, first meeting was 1974. The recent meeting, and that was 2-0 to Seattle. The recent meeting was September 17th last year, 2022, and Vancouver wins that one 2-1. And the next meeting is May 20th in Vancouver against Seattle. So that's what we're saying about the Cascadia clash. Now, I sort of touched on a little bit about you got to have time, longevity, and you got to build the history, and you got to stick around in the picture. And it's the history that makes the derby. You can't have a derby without the history. The next derby we're touching, you'll see where I'm going with that and why. Now, Alberta, Canada, the El Clasico. Bit of a name spiller from the El Clasico, but the El Clasico was a game that lasted 4 years. Now, that's not much history, and it was between FC Edmonton and Cavalry FC. It had the makings of going places, but one of the clubs wasn't able to stay afloat, and the CPL, Canadian Premier League, eventually went, we're taking the rights away from the FAF group. You can't operate a team in that city any longer. We're taking you out of the league. So they killed FC Edmonton in 2022, and that then killed the El Clasico rivalry with Cavalry FC. Now, like I say, if you don't have history, then you can't have a derby. And sometimes to name the El Clasico as a derby, it was a nice idea, but I think sometimes you need to wait maybe 10 years before you get yourself in a situation where you then buy a trophy, the Wild Rose Cup, which was awarded to the team, either Edmonton FC or Cavalry FC, whoever had the best league series record, okay, head to head. But again, there wasn't enough time. They didn't have much of a history between the two, and each year is garnering more time, more history, and more about the club. Let's face it, the CPL, Canadian Premier League, is only 5 years old. So it's still growing. It's still a baby. It's still in its real early stages of growth. Think of the MLS. We're in 2022 right now, and it started for a second time in 1996, yeah? So they're a 26-year-old product. CPL's only 5 years. You've got to run after you've learned to walk a long time. You can't just start sprinting away and think you're something that you're not. So with the Canadian rivalry, I loved it because I went to a couple of the Battle of Albertas or the El Clasicos. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and so did thousands of fans too. But like I say, it didn't last. It's not been around long enough. And there are other teams in Edmonton that we could go into. In fact, there's a video down below about the Edmonton Aviators in the library. Go in the library. Edmonton Aviators. It tells you about a defunct soccer team that went bust. Edmonton's had so many black eyes with soccer teams. I don't know if they'll get a team again. And secondly, Mark Noonan, the commissioner of CPL, Canadian Premier League, basically said that the team didn't operate very well. They didn't have great crowds. The team wasn't good enough, this, that, and the other. All of which I kind of have to disagree with a lot of it. And the coach, Alan Koch, he was absolutely furious with Mark Noonan's words about how bad things were at Edmonton. I have to agree with Alan Koch. I think it wasn't that bad. And I think that the guys in the squad busted their asses to really try and bring something on the day. But staying with the derby, they didn't have much of a chance sticking around, and the team is now defunct, and that's that. It is what it is. It is what it was. Nowadays, the biggest Canadian rivalry is basically on our side, the west side of Canada, is Seattle taking on the Vancouver Whitecaps. Guys, I hope that fills in the gaps on some of the rivalries and what it's all about. I had an immense fun of doing all the fact-finding for you. Please like. Does pay us back, really. If you enjoyed what you see, please like, because it's only the equity of paying your ticket into this show. We wouldn't ask you otherwise, but like I say, please like the video, do us a favor, and it's always nice to get feedback. If you liked it, drop us a comment down below. If you didn't like it, drop a comment down below. Either way, drop a comment down below, and remember, like, subscribe, and like, share, and tap that notification button, please. Okay, guys, there's the greatest soccer derbies. And like I say, there were other derbies that we could have touched, but you can't touch all of them. But the examples that we gave will certainly give you more information on what, where, and why, and everything about the histories. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let us know down below, and please like. Cheers, guys.